Okay, according to our schedule on D2L, and today we're reviewing for test 2, and test 2 is Tuesday, October 6th. Now, if you're sick or something, you can email me, like, as soon as you know, or if you're going out of town and have to miss. And I let you make up the test, but we take it as soon as possible, certainly within a week. But not being prepared for the test isn't an excuse. So I'll require documentation. I get your test to the testing center if I know in advance, especially. So, but be here if at all possible Tuesday to take the test. Review so today's the review. All right. Fall break is coming up. We have a test Tuesday, and then Thursday we have class, and then fall break. So Monday and Tuesday, October 12th and 13th, there's no classes. So you don't want to drive here. I mean, the school's not actually closed. The learning center's open and things like that, but there's no classes. Okay. All right. So test 2 study guide. It's posted online under test 2 or test reviews or something under content D2L. All right. So I have, like the first test, I have the first page. The part 1 is actually, part 1 is vocabulary words and basic understanding of concepts. And that's there's 9 questions. So the first page is the multiple choice and fill in the blank. Okay? So those are the concept questions. Again, so look through the notes on concepts. Look at the skill checks. You can see the book in my Stat Lab if you don't have it, or with the Pearson app with tablets or iPads. So look at the skill checks at the end of the sections. Of course, this test is over sections 1.6 through 1.10. Making sure you can see it all. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? All right. And then the rest of the test, you need to work your problems algebraically, like I did in class, like the lecture notes do. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 questions. There's 12 questions in this part. Some of them have parts A and B. Okay. A good thing for you to review for the test is to print out the extra worksheets, and I've given them back if I collected them, but print out the homework worksheets and on your own, and try those without looking at your notes. I won't collect those. I've already collected the ones I did. Now looking at notes. Maybe even a good thing would be to print out the notes and try to fill them in and do the examples without looking. I mean, that's a good. Do your My Math Lab Try to do that without looking at your notes. On your test, you don't get to see your notes. So try to do these things without your notes. You can look at them if you need to complete the problem, and then maybe you can hit similar exercise. But, okay, if you're just going to practice more on like 1.6, which was already due, you can go into Gradebook and click, or I think it comes up with that option. When you click on 1.6, it still lets you do it because it lets you do it late. But it says it either asks for the password, which is LATE, late, and it takes 20% off, or it lets you click on another spot. It says just for practice, so you could practice. Of course, there's that whole review in my math lab, so definitely, I'm going to write this up. It's optional, but do the test review in my math lab. It's worth 5% on the test. But you have to make at least, you have to score at least 80%. Okay, and that might help you better if you actually take notebook paper and take notes and do it. Or you can click on print the second thing if you have printing money. You could print it out. Okay, so that's the suggestions. Anytime you can get bonus points on a test without being in the test environment where you're stressed and everything and can't look at your notes, do it. And it helps you in your studying, and it helps you grade on the test. So, all right, the next thing they're telling you what formulas I give you for the test. Where is that? I'm looking for this formula sheet for the test. I've been using it, that's fine. Formula sheet for test 2. Don't know. Oh, here it is. Oh, that's the additional. I've displayed it in here before. I thought I had it. Oh, good. I do have it. Okay. So, this tells you that these are the equations given on the test. There's actually, these 3 are given on the test, but I also give you don't have to memorize the distance formula or the midpoint formula. And I think I have this posted under, I think I added it last night to D2L content. So you don't have to memorize these, but you do have to know what they mean. So this is, you get this formula sheet, but it's blank without information on it. So what are these things? This is the standard form. Of a circle. This is the general form. Circle. This is the test to see if F and G are inverses. If they're inverses, they undo each other. So F of G of X will just equal X, and G of F of X will just equal X. This is the distance formula. And this is the midpoint formula. This is what the formula sheet looks like. But you won't have these names on them. But So you gotta memorize what each thing is. Okay? Okay. And then these instructions, these are the instructions for finding the domain. Domain of the composite function f(g). If it's f composite g, then the inner function is g of x. The outer function is f of x. And then you set g of x equal to the restrictions above equal to step 2. And then the domain is, you find it from steps 1 and 3. So if I ask for the domain of, if I give you an f of x and a g of x and ask for the domain of f composite g, to get full credit you have to follow these steps. But you get most of the credit if you figure out the domain and just do it algebraically by, like in 1.7 worksheet, let's see, like we did in 1.7 worksheet. I told you this last time, so I guess So here, 1.7 worksheet, I'm not sure if you can see that, but f of x if they give you equals 4 over 3 over x minus 2. Okay. They gave you the function already, they didn't give you an f of x and a g of x. So you can just look at that and say, okay, you can't let x be 0 because you'd be divided by 0. Then set your denominator to 0 and solve. You can't let x be that number either. And then write your domain in interval notation. If you guys need help with interval notation, I can post some extra notes on that. So let me know if you're struggling with interval notation. But okay, let's see here on this one, and then on the test, you're going to have to, I want you to label the steps. You don't have to write step 1. You can write 1, 2, 3, 4. And I want you to find, if I ask for domain of f composite g, I want you to find it using the steps. And the steps are here on the formula sheet. Okay? But it doesn't say what it is. So you need to know that. Alright, so that's the formula sheet. You can get a blank copy of this. I'll bring them. You don't need to copy them. Alright, so we also give you the midpoint and distance formula. Okay, so what's on this test? Remember, I gave you back the Library of Functions quiz, but you need to know all 7 graphs, okay? So I brought, and I posted these also, if you missed class, I posted these notes on D2L filled in already, but yeah. You need to be able to answer parts of this. You need to know the constant function is f of x equals c. The identity function, you need to be able to do this kind of stuff for each of these functions. Absolute value, is there 7 functions? Or 6? I guess there's 7. We put 4 on the next page. The standard quadratic function, the square root function, and the standard cubic and the cube root. So these are posted online already, so you need to know those, what they are, memorize that, and then be able to do similar thing to the library functions quiz. All right. When given a function, be able to describe the steps for each transformation. Okay, so you need to be able to use transformations on your functions. I don't have that. I posted, yeah, so that was those transformations in 1.6. Yeah. All right. When given a function, be able to graph each step. So you have to be able to describe the steps and graph each step. That's section 1.6. 1.7. The domains of basic functions. So in 1.7, okay. In 1.7, you need to be able to find domains. Read the directions on the test. If it asks for a domain, it doesn't mean you're solving it for X or anything. You're just telling me what are the possible values of X in the largest set of real numbers, though. So when you have a square root function, don't set it to 0 and say it can't be, for instance, 7 here, and then exclude 7. 7's okay in a square root function. All right, you got to make sure the radicand, what's underneath it, the radical of the square root is greater than or equal to 0. Use your inequality. You got to add 7 to both sides. The domain is 7 to infinity. So when are we restricting the domains? Basically square root functions and dividing by 0. That's it. That's all we're doing. So when it's a square root function, you've got to memorize and know in your head that it's greater than or equal to 0. We need to make sure this is greater than or equal to 0. When you're dividing by something, you make sure the denominator can't be 0. And if you have 2 divisions in a function, you've got to make sure the denominator of the fraction inside the fraction isn't 0, and then you set the denominator of this part to 0, solve algebraically, and show me your work. I have space for work. You need to show me your work. And then write the domain in interval notation. Okay? So that's the domains of basic functions. So, whoops, where's mine? Oh, I covered it up. So, when do we have restrictions? If you have a square root, you have to make sure that this is greater than or equal to 0. And then if you have, say, 1 over x, you have to make sure the denominator can't be 0. That's it. And any other functions, we don't have restrictions. The 3x plus 21 had no restrictions. So that's when we get restrictions. Okay, you need to memorize these rules. I'm going to ask you to find f plus g of x. If you don't know what that means, you're not going to be able to find it for me. I think it's pretty obvious what it means. Didn't think people had to memorize it, but apparently. It's not always obvious, so you have to know what these mean. This is function notation for f minus g of x. So if I ask for these, you need to know that f, g next to each other with no symbol is f of x times g of x. Okay. Composite functions. You need to memorize f composite g, what it means. is f of g of x. You need to memorize that. Okay, then it's called, you need to know it's called a composite function. Domains of composite functions. You will be given the rules. I've got it on the formula sheet, but it's not labeled. Alright, and then you need to know, when you're given two functions, know how to solve these problems. Finding the composite of f composite g, finding g composite f, and finding f composite g of some number. We did that in the notes, so, you know, printing out the notes and working through them without looking, and, you know, might be handy. Or if you, my math lab should be asking you these things. If you write down your work, make sure you're not just guessing. So it lets you have 3 guesses, and if you never figure out why it works. For tests, you know, there's some test taking skills. You need to make sure you check your work, because you don't have, on a test you can't just hit enter and see if it's right and get another chance. So sometimes my math lab is detrimental to your learning because you're not checking your work. But you need to be able to check your work. Alright, and when you're given the composite function, you need to be able to break it down into the 2 original functions, just like the notes. So 1.7 at the last page of the notes gave you a function and asked you to break it down into 2. If you can do f composite g, f is going to be the outer function, so you choose the absolute value for the outer, and g is going to be the inner function, so that's the inner. So practice doing that too. So, those are on the tests, right? Alright, and then next page. So basically I'm suggesting to go through the notes, practice the problems there, practice the examples. If you have time, maybe if you write out your my stat lab, or my math lab, sorry, you know, you will get it too, but alright. Especially if you missed class, I have this stuff all integrity, so you should make sure you're watching integrity. If you miss class, it's your responsibility to watch integrity, so you don't get behind. Alright. And then the next page, inverse functions. Inverse functions, you need to know that the notation is f inverse, f to the -1 looks like. To prove that 2 functions are inverses of each other, take f of g of x if that equals x, and g of f of x if that equals x. So you need to show this. It's on the formula sheet. We did that in this is section 1.8. Okay. So I've got 1.8 over here. So we did that in an example. Right here. We did that in the notes. There. It ended up getting, we got x. Okay. You need to memorize the steps. Okay, yeah. Memorize the steps to find the inverse of a function. The steps are not on your formula sheet. So that was where this is the steps. You replace f of x with y, interchange x and y, solve for y. If f has an inverse, replace y with f inverse of x. notation. So practice that. We did that here. I did it with the steps labeled in class for you. Okay, and then the horizontal line test for inverses. So what we had was, if we had a graph, if we could make a horizontal line anywhere here and go through 2 points, then there's no inverse. If a function has an inverse, it's 1-to-1. Know what 1-to-1 functions are? Those are functions that have inverses. The actual definition is, it's no two different ordered pairs have the same second component. It's a function where no two ordered pairs have the same second component. Okay, that was a definition. All right, graphing F. You need to be able to graph. We graphed F and F inverse. You need to be able to do that. You might want to bring a straight edge to help you graph these things. So you're going to be graphing on this test. When giving the graph or an equation of a line, be able to get the inverse and the domain and range from it. So remember that the graph of F inverse is the reflection about the line y equals x. And when we were graphing, if we have a line here, and this is, say, 4, 2, okay, if that's 4, 2, then the inverse will have 2, 4 in it, 2, 4. If this goes through 0, 0, then this little picture I made, you switch the 0 and the 0 around, then these must be inverses. Here's the line y equals x. So you can switch. The easiest way to graph the inverse is to recognize points. Note points on your y equal the original function, and switch the points and connect the lines, connect the dots to make a line. On these inverses, I'm only giving you straight lines, linear functions. So it should be easier to graph. All right. So we did that. We did some graphing. You know, we did some graphing in the notes for 1.8. Finding inverses. No, I won't have you draw something like this on the test. You're drawing straight lines on the test. Okay, and then here's another, we did another example like that. We made you find the inverse. This was in the notes. We found the inverse using the steps. We solved for y. And then it was kind of hard to do, it's hard to plot 1/3 x plus 4/3. So I took my original line, which was easier to plot, with y equals mx plus b. Go up 3/1. I plotted that, identified some points, switched them, and connected the dots. And then the domain and range, they're switched, but for this example, they're all minus infinity to infinity. But the domain of the original function will be the range of your inverse, and the range of your original function will be the domain of your inverse. Okay? So that was 1.8. In section 1.9 we did circles. You do not need to memorize these. These are on the formula sheet. You need to know what they are. You don't need to memorize them. So you need to be able to use those in an application problem similar to worksheet 1.9 that we did in class with the circles. So when you do the circle problems, to find the center of the circle, I expect you to use the midpoint formula. And then you can check your result by looking at the graph and see if it makes sense. But use the midpoint. Use this midpoint formula to find the center of the circle. To find the radius, you use this formula. But you want to use, I'll write it up here. Use the center, it is just easier. The center and one other point. So, okay, so here's definition of a circle. You need to know that. Where's that? Let's see. Okay, here's the definition of a circle. That might be something that might be on the first page. These definitions, look over your definitions for the first page, especially the ones that were in the notes. Okay. That's the definition of a circle. Okay. So, it's in your notes in 1.9. If you're given the standard form of the equation of a circle, okay. You need to know that that's a standard form. If you're given something in that form, you need to be able to identify the center and the radius. So, if, say, you're given this, identify these, and vice versa. All right? We did that in class in the notes. We had to go both ways. Know how to use the standard form of the equation of a circle to graph it. So the standard form's here. If you're given that, identify H and K and graph it. No, you don't need to, you can bring a compass if you want, but you don't need to. Know how to use, let's see, given the general form, this is the general form of the circle. Know how to go from general form to standard form. Complete the square. So we can we can do a practice, another one of those. Complete the square. So that's on the test. All right, completing the square. So, I mean, I could look up a problem from the book to complete the square. So if you got these, let's see, Pearson, I've shown you this before, I'm sure. Again, you can look at the textbook with the, it's Pearson eText. It should be free, it is free, and it's available on iPad and tablets, so it's a handy way to look at your book. And you just log in with your MyStatLab. Login, MyMathLab login, okay? So, if I want to go to, so completing the square might be something, it was in a worksheet we did, but we want to pick out another problem to do. Blitzer. I think it's downloading it, yeah, okay. Let's see, I gotta go to table of contents. This is functions and graphs. I want to look up 1.9, right? It's going to 1.9 for me. Unless I have it. I don't have it. Okay, so we did some of those in the notes. You know, I can show you. We did 2 completing the squares in the notes. Well, this is coming up. Oops. I'm trying to bring up the book. Does anybody have a copy of the book here?
No, the current edition. It's the older edition.
Oh, if you have the older one, I could just look up. It's probably the same. Because this is taking too long.
It's that one.
Yeah, that'll
It's
work.
the last one.
That'll work. It's probably similar. So I can do a one, completing the square seems like it would be. So, I mean, we have, this book has all these completing the squares. Your StatLab probably has you doing this too, and you can just hit similar exercise to complete the square. So I'll pick one of these that we didn't already do. Okay, here's some paper. Thanks, Colin. That'll work great. All right. So we did. So they have, I'm just going to pick one, x squared plus y squared plus 8x plus 4y plus 16. Okay, so this is number 54 on page 250 in the old edition. The pages will be similar. It's approximately. Okay, so what's the first step in completing the square?
Group them together.
Right. Group group them and move all your constants to the right and group everything. So x squared plus 8x. All the x's grouped together, and then it'll be plus blank plus y squared plus 4y plus blank, and then you're going to you would have subtracted the 16 from both sides. equals negative 16 plus blank plus blank.
I thought you just added it to the other side. What you did in the notes.
Oh, well, if it said minus 16, then I'd add 16. Okay.
In the notes, I thought you just added it.
Oh, well, which one are you talking about? This step right here?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this step, when you move it to the other side, is constant.
Yeah.
It's got to be the opposite sign. So that's why it's negative there. In the notes, I had a negative 12 here, so when I moved it to the other side,
Okay.
it got to be positive. Oh, and here in the notes also. So
Okay.
that's why I added it, not, you know,
Yeah.
okay? Good question though, because I didn't realize, you know, in my notes examples, I didn't have a plus sign. So. Okay, but now you do have to add, if you add something here, you add the same thing here. You add the same thing to both sides, but when you're moving something from one side to the other, you gotta change its sign. And so this way, this becomes 0 here, goes away, and it's negative 16. All right, and then you guys remember this? How do you find the perfect thing to add to the x squared plus 8x to make it a perfect square?
Half the midpoint.
You take half of 8 and square it. Half of the middle, so you're going to take this, take half of 8 and square it. So that's 4 squared. So you can just write 4 squared here if you want, realizing that's 16, so you're going to have to add 16 here. So this is going to be a perfect square. Now, all right. What do I have to add to here to make? So I take 4 and take half of 4, square it, either 2 squared. So I can write 2 squared here and 4 here. You could also write 4 and 16 over on this side, but this tells you what you need to, how you need to write this now. It's x plus 4 squared, y plus 2 squared, and then minus 16 plus 16 is 0, plus 4 is 4. Okay, now the other class said, or maybe this class, I don't know, somebody said, what happened to the, they said, so you just take the middle term out? Well, it's still there. Remember, if you square this, you'll get a middle term. But it looks, yeah, to write it, I guess you do just take the middle term out. But the middle term's still there. Remember, if you FOIL this, you'll get an x squared plus a 16, but you'll also have the middle term, 4x plus 4x. All right, and then if you want to identify h and k, remember the formula x minus h squared has a minus sign in it. So if you need to identify h and k, it's going to be minus 4, comma minus 2. R is going to be the square root of 4, which is 2. All right? Does that help? Going over that. Let's see. Okay, then the last section is all those word problems. Now let us solve the types of problems worked in class. So, get up and down on it. Check. I don't need it now. Okay, so 1.10. Some of these problems will be on the test, and you don't know which one, so be familiar with these. Right?
What the exact questions?
It'll be very similar, they'll change the numbers. Okay? So be familiar with these and how to solve them. 1.10. Now I have a little Kahoot for fun, if you want to do a Kahoot. But we're done with our review. I think that most people want to go. That's fine. It's really hard to understand. Thank you guys. Any questions?